After a long weekend family gathering at my childhood home in the suburbs of Illinois, I returned to my small apartment in Chicago completely drained. Everything felt normal, the usual post-family visit quiet settling in, until I decided to open my banking app to transfer funds for my electric bill. My eyes instantly blurred at the number staring back at me on the screen. Just $85.52. I checked it multiple times, certain it was a glitch or my exhaustion playing tricks, but the number remained horrifyingly unchanged. Just 2 days prior, I had over $10,000 in that account. The blood drained from my face, and my heart began pounding like a drum inside my chest as the chilling realization set in. The money was gone. With shaking hands, I knew this wasn't an accident. Someone had taken it, and the lingering warmth of the family gathering quickly turned ice cold as suspicion began to build. You won't believe what happened next and who was behind it. If you've ever felt taken advantage of by those closest to you, stick around and please consider subscribing to hear the rest of my story unfold. Still numb with shock, the number on my phone screen burned into my memory. $83.52. It felt unreal, a cruel joke played by a universe I thought I understood. But the bank confirmed it. The transactions were made from a device previously logged in, the same IP address as a personal computer I sometimes used at my parents' house. The chilling implication hit me like a physical blow. Without a second thought, I grabbed my keys and drove straight back to the familiar suburban street, the very place that had just hosted our large, boisterous family gathering. Images of hugs, shared meals, and laughter still flickered in my mind, a stark, painful contrast to the knot tightening in my stomach. Pulling into the driveway, the house looked much the same, quiet now after the weekend's festivities. Stepping back into the old kitchen, the scent of leftover roast lingered in the air, a scent that usually brought comfort, but now felt suffocating. My heart was still a wild animal, pounding against my ribs as I automatically reached for a glass of water from the cupboard I'd known since childhood. "You're back already?" My sister Jessica's voice drifted in from the living room, casual, breezy, utterly devoid of concern, as if nothing out of the ordinary could possibly bring me back so soon. She was curled on the couch, a glass of red wine balanced on her crossed legs, her expression placid, relaxed. There wasn't the slightest hint of unease or curiosity about my unexpected return. "I just checked my account," I managed to say, attempting to keep my voice steady, level, but the tightness in my throat made the words sound strained, fragile. Just then, my brother-in-law, Mark, ambled out from the kitchen, holding a soda can, a lazy smirk playing on his lips. He leaned against the refrigerator, looking half amused, half dismissive, the picture of nonchalant entitlement. "Oh, that," he drawled, the smirk widening. "Yeah, we needed that money more than you did, Sarah." The words landed like a physical blow, a slap across the face. I froze, stunned, unable to process the audacious confession, the sheer lack of apology or explanation. They took my money, thousands of dollars, and this was their response? A casual admission and a statement of greater need? Jessica chuckled softly, a light, airy sound that grated on my raw nerves. She shrugged as if my reaction was completely overblown, overly dramatic. "Don't be so dramatic," she said, her voice laced with condescension. "You've got a good job, no debt, no kids. You live alone." Her words twisted the knife deeper. It wasn't just that they took the money. It was their immediate justification, their entitlement, their complete disregard for my feelings or the fact that it was my money, earned through hard work and careful saving. I turned to my mother, Donna, who was sitting in her usual corner chair, calmly knitting, her expression as serene as if we were discussing the weather. "Mom, did you know about this?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly despite my effort to control it. She sighed, not even looking up from her needles, her voice gentle, almost soothing, as if I were complaining about something trivial, like the soup being too salty at dinner. "You're always so sensitive, sweetheart. You have more than enough. What's wrong with helping family a little?" "Helping?" Draining my account to almost nothing was helping. Her words were a second betrayal, confirming her complicity, her passive acceptance of their actions. I looked to my father, Paul, who was engrossed in his phone, as he so often was. Without looking up, he mumbled, "Don't use harsh words. It's family business." Family business. The phrase hung in the air, a shield they hid behind, absolving themselves of any real responsibility or guilt. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, the complete lack of empathy or understanding from any of them. "But how did you even get into my banking info?" I pressed, needing to understand the mechanics of this violation. Jessica shrugged again, a dismissive gesture that spoke volumes about her lack of concern. "I used Mom's computer," she said casually, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "And saw your account was still logged in. If you didn't log out," she trailed off, the unspoken accusation hanging in the air. "It was my fault. I was the one who was careless, who enabled their actions." Her tone implied that what they did was perfectly justified because I had made it easy for them. My hands clenched at my sides, nails digging into my palms, my heart hammering in my chest. Mark chimed in again, shrugging as if this whole confrontation was a minor inconvenience. "It's not like we bought luxury stuff. It was for rent, groceries, just to survive. Otherwise, we'd be starving." I looked at them, all three of them. Jessica, Mark, my parents. Not one apology, not one look of guilt or shame, not even a proper, sincere explanation. Just excuses, justifications, and a stunning sense of entitlement. "What did I do to deserve this?" I whispered, though I knew they weren't really listening, didn't really care about the pain etched on my face. Jessica tossed her hair back with an impatient gesture and mumbled, "You can earn it back. Don't be so dramatic." Slowly, deliberately, I picked up my purse from the kitchen counter. No one stopped me. No one asked if I was okay, if I needed anything. My mother, out of habit, offered only a standard parting remark. "Don't forget Sunday dinner." I walked towards the door, my heart pounding, an emptiness spreading through my chest. But before I left, hand on the doorknob, I paused and looked back at the faces that showed no remorse, no understanding. "If you think I'm just going to let this go," I said, my voice low but steady with a rising resolve, "wait and see what happens next." Jessica giggled again, a sound that was like fingernails on a chalkboard to me now. "Oh, please, Sarah. You're being so theatrical. Honestly, we needed that money more than you. Don't be selfish." I didn't respond. Stepping outside, it had started to rain, a cold, steady drizzle. Inside me, another storm was quietly beginning to gather force. I drove through the rain, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, my mind a whirlwind of their dismissive words, their entitled justifications. "We needed that money more than you." No remorse, no apology. It felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I knew I couldn't go home yet. I needed air, space, time to process the devastating truth of what had just happened and what it meant about the people I had always called family. Driving away from the house, the cold rain mirrored the storm raging inside me. Gripped tight on the steering wheel, my knuckles white, I couldn't shake the echo of Mark's words, their complete lack of remorse or apology. "We needed that money more than you." It felt like a cruel joke, a nightmare I couldn't escape. I knew I couldn't go back to my empty apartment just yet. I needed air, space to breathe, and make sense of the utter devastation I felt. I pulled into the quiet parking lot near Lincoln Park, a place where I often jogged on weekend mornings, seeking refuge in its familiarity. Turning off the engine, the sudden silence was deafening, broken only by the drumming of rain on the roof. I sat there for a long moment, staring ahead, the traffic lights blurring through the downpour, my mind spinning with every dismissive word spoken back in that kitchen. With a heavy sigh, I reopened the banking app, the source of this pain. The number was still there, small and cruel, just as shameless and cold as Jessica's face had been when she laughed. It was then, staring at that figure, that I realized maybe I shouldn't have been completely surprised. This wasn't the first time they had treated my finances as their own personal safety net. I thought back to when I was just 27, newly hired as a marketing manager at a major pharmaceutical company in Chicago, still adjusting to the demands of a new job and a new city. Jessica called, her voice sweet and apologetic. "Hey, my phone got cut off. Can you spot me some cash until payday?" Without hesitation, I wired her the money. They were family after all. You help family, right? Then came Mark, unemployed for nearly 6 months. "Just need a few hundred to get by until I find something," he'd said. I stayed quiet, tightening my own belt, because what else could I do? A year later, for my niece Haley's birthday, Jessica sent me a suggested gift list. The cheapest item was over $200. I wanted to say no. It felt exorbitant for a child's gift when I was saving for my own modest goals. But then my mother called, her voice laced with gentle pressure. "You're not getting anything for your niece? She's so excited. You're better off than the rest of us, you know." And just like that, I became the first person they called whenever money was tight. Jessica needed a new car. I chipped in on the down payment, depleting a chunk of my carefully saved emergency fund. Mark lost his wallet. I wired money that night, no questions asked. My mother's electric bill was overdue. I dipped into savings again. Every single time, the justification was the same. "You're the most stable one in the family." They said it like a compliment, a recognition of my hard work and financial responsibility. But they never once followed it up with, "Are you doing okay, Sarah?" They never stopped to consider that I had days where I counted every dollar, skipped vacations, or put off buying things I needed or wanted for myself because their needs always seemed more urgent, more important. A few months ago, I had to turn down a long-planned vacation with my best friend because the money I had saved for it went to help Mark with a sudden rent increase. They said it was a compliment, but sitting there in my car, the rain drumming on the roof, I finally saw it for what it truly was. Not gratitude, but an unspoken declaration. It's your job. Your stability isn't for your own security or future. It's a resource for the rest of us to tap into whenever needed. I was the family bank, a credit card with a heartbeat, expected to always be there, always ready to dispense funds without question or complaint. The rain kept falling, a steady, melancholic sound. I turned on the radio, hoping the noise would drown out the ache in my chest, the profound feeling of being used and unseen. Nothing could soothe the feeling of being seen as a tool, not a daughter, not a sister, just a convenient source of money. My phone buzzed, a text from my mother. "Jessica said you're upset about the money. Don't make a big deal, sweetheart. We're family." Family. Why did that word feel so heavy, so suffocating now? I used to think that if I just remained patient, generous, and understanding enough, they would eventually realize the extent of my help, maybe express gratitude, or at the very least, ask how I was doing. But they never did, because in their eyes, I didn't need help. And the one who doesn't need help is the one expected to help everyone else, indefinitely and without complaint. I took a deep, shuddering breath and opened the Notes app on my phone. Every payment I had ever made, every late-night call asking for funds, every time I had denied myself something for them, I started writing it all down, not because I planned to ask for it back, not yet, but so I would never forget, so I would never allow myself to be put in this position again, treated as a bottomless well of resources with no personal needs or limits. As I typed, the rain began to ease, pale sunlight peeking tentatively through the gray clouds. I sat up straighter, hands on the wheel. But this time, I wasn't looking back at the house I had just left, or the painful memories. I was looking forward, towards a future where my worth wasn't measured in dollars and cents given away, but in my own strength and resolve. Driving back to my Chicago apartment, as dusk settled over the city, the earlier rain had stopped, but the air felt heavy, thick with the residual weight of the day's confrontation and the years of suppressed frustration that had finally erupted. I was still reeling from their utter indifference, the way they so easily dismissed my feelings and justified their actions, But a new, cold resolve had begun to take root during my time at the park. I wouldn't let this go. Not this time. This wasn't just about the money. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my boundaries, and my sense of self that had been chipped away at, transaction by transaction, over the years. Arriving home, the quiet apartment that usually felt like a sanctuary now felt like a space I needed to protect, a space that had been indirectly violated by their actions. I bypassed the usual routines and went straight to my desk, pulling out a file folder I hadn't looked at in years, a collection of scattered receipts, old messages, and email confirmations I had saved almost instinctively, never fully understanding why until this moment. It turned out, some part of me had always known, on a subconscious level, that these quiet sacrifices, these constant bailouts, might someday require proof. This folder was the physical manifestation of that buried instinct. I began spreading everything out on my desk, a timeline of financial dependency laid bare. A receipt for 92.50 cents for Jessica's phone bill from 3 years ago. A printout of a wire transfer for $200 to Mark for an urgent issue that I later learned was anything but. Emails from my mother asking for help with the mortgage payment just this once that turned into a recurring request. There were dozens, maybe hundreds, of transactions, large and small, each one a knot in the tangled web of my family's financial reliance on me. It was overwhelming, seeing it all laid out like that, a tangible record of how much I had given, how much I had sacrificed. Over the next 3 nights, I immersed myself in this painful excavation, building a detailed spreadsheet on my laptop. I categorized each expense: medical bills, living expenses like rent and groceries, car repairs. And then there were the other categories, the ones that gnawed at me the most, labeled simply unjustified or questionable. I color-coded everything: green for clearly necessary help, yellow for expenses that seemed inflated or unnecessary, and red for the ones that felt like pure indulgence at my expense, like the $1,250 Mark had spent on a high-end gaming console last Black Friday. A purchase I remembered vividly because I had to cancel a planned winter trip with colleagues just to make my own insurance payment that week. As I worked, painstakingly entering each date, amount, and description, the emotional weight of it all pressed down on me. Each line item wasn't just a number. It was a memory of a time I said no to myself so I could say yes to them, a reminder of a vacation skipped, a purchase deferred, a night spent worrying about their finances instead of enjoying my own life. It was a catalog of boundaries crossed, of generosity taken for granted, of love that felt conditional on my financial contributions. And then I found it, the transaction directly linked to the recent massive withdrawal. I had called the bank the morning after the confrontation and requested a full transaction report for the past 10 days. The file, thick and daunting, was 16 pages long. Flipping through it, marking suspicious charges in red, one entry jumped out at me: an anonymous online transfer for nearly $2,800 from an IP address that precisely matched the one registered to my mother's house. The bank representative's words echoed in my mind: made from a device previously logged in, same IP address. Yes, I had used my mother's computer when I was there, but I was meticulous about logging out, especially from sensitive accounts like my bank. I had only checked email in my calendar. Someone in that house had accessed my account intentionally, remembered my login information from a previous brief use, or perhaps even written it down, and waited for what they perceived as the opportune moment, right after a family gathering where trust was supposedly paramount. The realization sent a fresh wave of cold fury through me. This wasn't a desperate one-time mistake. It felt calculated, a planned violation of trust carried out by the people I was supposed to be able to rely on. The hours I spent poring over the documents solidified my resolve. This evidence wasn't just for my own records. It was the foundation upon which I would build my case. It was the proof that their actions weren't helping family or borrowing. They were theft, a systematic exploitation that had gone on for far too long. By the time I finished, The spreadsheet was a comprehensive, damning indictment of their behavior, and I knew exactly what my next step had to be. I printed out the most crucial documents, saved the spreadsheet to a USB drive, and began preparing the formal complaint form, my mind clear, my determination unwavering. The time for quiet suffering was over. Monday morning arrived, bringing with it a cool, overcast sky over Chicago. The past few nights had been a blur of poring over bank statements, sorting receipts, and meticulously building that spreadsheet, a visual representation of years of financial entanglement and silent sacrifice. My desk was now clear, the documents neatly organized in a binder, the USB drive containing the digital evidence tucked safely in my purse. The knot of anxiety in my stomach was tight, a physical manifestation of the daunting step I was about to take. Going to the authorities wasn't something I had ever envisioned doing, especially not against my own family. But the cold, hard evidence I had compiled, coupled with the unwavering dismissal I had faced in their kitchen, left me with no other path forward. This wasn't just about recovering the money. It was about drawing a line, a definitive boundary that should have been established long ago. Taking a deep breath, I drove downtown to the Financial Crimes Division. The office was quiet, the air thick with a formal, almost sterile atmosphere that felt a world away from the familiar chaos of my family's house. I approached the front desk, stated my purpose, and was directed to a small private meeting room. After a short wait, a young officer entered, introducing herself as Officer Miller. She had a calm, professional demeanor, and listened patiently as I began to explain the situation. My voice slightly trembling at first, then gaining strength as I spoke about the missing funds and my subsequent confrontation with my family. I presented the binder filled with transaction records, the highlighted bank report showing the suspicious withdrawal and the matching IP address, the printouts of demanding text messages, and the USB drive containing the comprehensive spreadsheet I had labored over. Officer Miller took the documents, her expression serious, and began to flip through the pages, nodding occasionally as she read. She asked clarifying questions about the family gathering, the access to the computer, and the nature of the past financial support I had provided. It felt validating to have someone, a professional authority figure, finally listen to my story and acknowledge the gravity of the situation without minimizing my feelings or making excuses for my family's behavior. After reviewing the initial documents, Officer Miller looked up, her gaze steady. "Miss Sarah," she said, "based on the information you've provided, we have sufficient grounds to initiate a preliminary investigation. This falls under financial fraud and unauthorized access to personal information." The words were formal, official, but hearing them spoken aloud gave a weight and legitimacy to my complaint that had been missing before. It wasn't just a family dispute. It was potentially a crime. She then asked for the names of the individuals involved. Taking another deep breath, I provided them. Jessica Walker, my sister, Mark Walker, my brother-in-law, and Donna Grant and Paul Grant, my mother and father. Speaking their names in this context felt surreal, a stark departure from the way I had always referred to them. These were no longer just family members. They were now individuals potentially subject to legal action. The process of formally filing the complaint took a little longer, involving paperwork and providing detailed statements, but Officer Miller guided me through it patiently. By the time I left the precinct, the gray skies outside seemed less oppressive. It wasn't a feeling of triumph or satisfaction that washed over me, but something quieter, more profound. Relief. After years of staying silent, of shouldering financial burdens that weren't mine, of being taken for granted and ultimately betrayed, I had finally spoken up. I had taken a concrete step towards reclaiming my agency and establishing boundaries. Walking out into the city streets, I knew this was just the beginning. The preliminary investigation would take time, and there was no guarantee of a specific outcome. My family's reaction was bound to be intense, perhaps even volatile. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of light inside me, not because I wished for them to be punished, but because I had finally stopped punishing myself by remaining silent and allowing their behavior to continue. The waiting period began, a period of uncertainty, but also of quiet resolve. knowing that I had done the right thing for myself, regardless of the difficult road ahead. I had set the wheels of justice in motion, and now I could only wait to see where the day would lead. 2 weeks passed after I filed the report, each day a tense exercise in patience. I went through the motions of work and daily life, but the underlying anxiety was a constant hum. I knew the preliminary investigation was underway, but the waiting was agonizing. The silence from the authorities, almost as unnerving as the silence from my family, who had apparently taken my parting words seriously enough to leave me alone for a while. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, as I was in the middle of a Zoom meeting, an unknown number flashed across my phone screen. I muted the call, stepped onto my small balcony overlooking the city, and answered. It was Officer Miller. "Miss Sarah," she said, her voice calm and professional. "We've completed the preliminary investigation. We have sufficient grounds to move forward." My heart leaped into my throat. The investigative unit will be visiting the individual's residences today. I froze, the gravity of the situation settling in a new way. It wasn't satisfaction I felt in that moment, not a sense of victory, but more a profound wave of relief. After all these years, after all the silent sacrifices and the recent blatant betrayal, someone in a position of authority finally saw what I had endured. The system was working, taking my complaint seriously, acknowledging that what happened was not just a family business, but a potential crime. That night, my phone became a hot wire, ringing non-stop. First my mother, then Jessica, then Mark. I didn't pick up. I watched the screen light up with their names, the frantic energy emanating from their calls palpable even through the silent display. When the calls stopped, the texts began pouring in, a cascade of accusatory and demanding messages. "Call your mother now," one read, followed by, "What are you doing, Sarah? Did you really call the police?" Another from Jessica. "My bank account is frozen. I can't pay Haley's tuition. This is going too far, Sarah." And Mark, "They suspended me from work. You can't do this over one mistake." Their messages were a whirlwind of panic, self-pity, and still no acknowledgement of their actions, no apology, just a desperate focus on the consequences they were facing. They were outraged that I had dared to disrupt their lives, completely blind to the fact that they had already devastated mine. I didn't respond to any of them. I couldn't. There was nothing left to say to people who still couldn't see beyond their own immediate problems. An hour or so later, a text came through from an old neighbor who still lived down the street from my parents. "Sarah, are you okay? There are 3 people in jackets labeled Financial Crimes Unit outside Donna's house. They were asking about you, too." The news was spreading. It wasn't just contained within the family anymore. The reality of the investigation, of the legal process I had initiated, was now external, visible, potentially public. The next day, walking into my office downtown, I could feel the shift in the atmosphere. As I stepped into the elevator, a few coworkers offered curious glances, a subtle but noticeable change from the usual morning greetings. Later that morning, my manager, a kind and understanding woman, approached me discreetly. "Sarah," she said softly, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder, "we received a call from a local reporter asking to verify a financial investigation linked to your name. We didn't confirm anything, of course, but if you need time off or any support, just say the word." I smiled softly, a genuine smile born of quiet resolve. "It's okay," I replied, my voice steady. "I'm doing the right thing." That evening, sitting by my window, watching the lights glow from the surrounding apartments, Jessica's words from years ago echoed in my head. "I swear this family only survives because of you." She had meant it as a kind of twisted acknowledgement, but now I understood its true meaning. Yes, they survived because of me, because of my willingness to continuously give, to be the dependable one, but they never saw me as a person, as Sarah, with my own hopes, fears, and limitations. I was just a wallet, a tool, a means to an end. And now, that tool had finally said, enough. As I grappled with the fallout, something unexpected began to happen. My phone buzzed with a message from an unfamiliar name, followed by another and another over the next few days. Melanie Carter, Jessica's cousin-in-law, who I barely knew, reached out. An old college friend I hadn't spoken to in years texted me after reading something I had shared on my personal blog about setting boundaries. They had heard whispers of what I was doing, of the stand I was taking, and their messages weren't about the money or the legal case. They were messages of solidarity, of shared experience. I was stuck in a similar cycle, Melanie wrote, describing how her family also expected her to give endlessly because she was luckier. My college friend confessed, "I used to think you were just really strong, like you didn't need anyone. But now I get it. You were so strong that everyone assumed you'd be fine no matter what." Their words were like balm to a wound I hadn't realized was still open. They saw me. They understood the invisible weight I had been carrying, and they were inspired by my courage to finally put it down. Their support was a lifeline, confirming that I wasn't alone in this struggle, and that my decision, as difficult as it was the right one, not just for me, but potentially for others too. I opened my journal and wrote a single line, a declaration of independence. I am not the family bank, I am Sarah. For the first time, I saw my name on a page, not tied to a bill or a money transfer, just my name. A person. And the path to freedom, though challenging, finally felt within reach. 3 weeks after filing the report and enduring the initial wave of frantic, self-serving calls from my family, I made another difficult but necessary decision. I filed for an extended leave of absence from my job, arranging to work remotely indefinitely. Then, without telling anyone from my family, I packed everything I needed into a rented car and left Chicago on a cloudy Wednesday morning, driving west across the state like I was shedding an old skin. It felt less like running away and more like finally moving towards something better. Leaving behind the woman who had been smothered by unreasonable expectations and quietly drained by the people who were supposed to love her unconditionally. My destination was Boulder, Colorado, a small city I had passed through years ago on a work trip. Back then, I only had a few hours to wander the downtown area, sip coffee in a cozy cafe, and soak in the relaxed atmosphere. But the sense of calm I felt that day had stayed with me, a quiet promise of a different kind of life. Now, it was the place I chose to begin again. I rented a small studio apartment with white walls and big windows overlooking the mountains, a space that felt bright and hopeful. Within days, I bought a new desk, arranged fresh flowers in vases, and for the first time in years, I didn't have to clear space for someone else's needs, their bills, or their urgent demands. I changed my phone number, a physical cutting of the cord that had bound me for so long. Strangely, or perhaps not strangely at all, once the constant drain of my family's demands was removed, my energy returned. I slept through the night, ate regular meals, without a knot of anxiety in my stomach, and when I sat at my new desk to work, my mind felt clearer, more focused than it had in years. The legal process was ongoing. I knew from Officer Miller that Amanda was under investigation for unauthorized transfers, Mark for withdrawing funds from an unapproved device, and my parents for using part of the money for illegal mortgage payments, which could be subject to recovery. But the details of the case no longer consumed me the way they once would have. The focus had shifted from seeking justice from them to building a life for myself. My family, of course, continued to reach out, their messages now tinged with thinly veiled panic rather than dismissive arrogance. Nathan called repeatedly. I blocked his number. Less than 10 minutes later, an email arrived from an unfamiliar address. It was him, pleading, claiming his work had suspended him, and he couldn't lose everything over one mistake. Still no apology, just a desperate attempt to get me to intervene and fix the consequences he had brought upon himself. Then, a message from my dad, something rare enough to give me pause. The bank sent a foreclosure warning. If we don't pay in 30 days, we lose the house. Reading it over and over, there was no admission of wrongdoing, no apology for the financial ruin they had caused me, just a cold statement of their impending crisis and the faint, unmistakable hope that, like always, I would step in to save them. I didn't reply. But that night, standing by my window, watching the streetlights spill across the glass, I thought of all the times I had skipped lunch to wire Mom money on time, the dates I had canceled because Jessica called me in tears, the sacrifices I had made that weren't just financial, but emotional, taking away my peace, my time, my own life. This time, I wasn't going back. That weekend, I drove towards the Edmonds shoreline, a place where my dad and I used to go fishing every summer when I was little. No one from my family knew where I was. No one asked how I was doing. The same people who had called me their lifeline were now only reaching out to salvage the damage they had caused. Mid-afternoon, my phone lit up again. A message from my mother. "Sarah, I'm begging you. I know I was wrong, but if we lose the house, I don't know how I'll survive. Please don't abandon me." I stared at the screen for a long time, my chest tightening, but not from guilt this time. From the painful clarity that even now, facing losing her home, she was thinking about the house, about herself, not about the daughter whose life she had helped dismantle. No one asked if I was okay. Setting my phone down, I stepped onto the sand, letting the ocean breeze blow away the last vestiges of that heavy expectation. I knew I had entered the hardest part, the part where they would call me cruel, ungrateful, even destructive. But it was also the part where I was no longer expected to carry what was never mine to hold. Looking out at the vast water, for the first time in years, my mind wasn't filled with bills, money requests, or late-night calls. I was thinking about me and the peace I was finally starting to feel, piece by piece. Just 2 weeks after settling into Boulder, my boss, Julian, called. "Sarah," he said, "I just reviewed your new strategy plan. It's brilliant. Have you considered taking over as regional coordinator for the entire West Coast?" I paused for a moment, looking out the window where sunlight sparkled through the pine trees. A year ago, hearing those words, I probably would have said no, held back by the invisible chains of my family's needs. But now, unburdened, I answered firmly, "I'm ready, Julian." He chuckled. "I knew you would be. Congratulations, Sarah." When the call ended, I made myself a cup of tea, curled up in a knit blanket on the balcony, and let the breeze run gently through my hair. I had done it. I had pulled myself out of that cycle where I was always giving, and no one ever asked, "Are you okay?" No more desperate calls, no more checking my bank account in quiet panic. Every message I received now was from people who genuinely cared. Coworkers, old friends, a few new ones I'd met through yoga classes. No one asked for money. They simply asked, "How are you feeling today?" Or, "Want to grab dinner tonight?" I hadn't just found freedom. I had found myself again. One afternoon, I returned to the coffee shop from years ago, sitting at the same table by the window. The shop owner, a kind older man, remembered me faintly. "You've been here before, haven't you? Weren't you the one who asked about the jazz track I was playing that day?" I laughed. "That was me," I said. "And now I live here," he smiled, pointing outside the window. "This place heals a lot of people." I nodded. Nothing more needed to be said. That night, writing in my journal, I understood it clearly. I spent my youth guarding a door for a family that never wanted to come in to see me, only to take what was inside. Now, I had locked that door, and I was keeping the key for myself. This new life wasn't loud or dramatic. There were no cheers. But it was quiet, and to me, that was the most luxurious thing I had ever owned. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if Jessica might call one day, her voice trembling, genuinely remorseful. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going back. Not because I didn't love them in some distant, complicated way, but because I had learned to love myself first. One crisp fall morning, as I watered the plants on my balcony, my phone pinged with a new email. I opened my inbox and paused at an unfamiliar name, Melanie Carter. It took me a few seconds to place her, Jessica's cousin-in-law, someone I had only seen briefly at family gatherings. The subject line read, "Thank you, Sarah." Curious, I opened it. You probably don't remember me well, she wrote. I'm Melanie. I was stuck in a similar cycle. My family always said I was luckier, so I had to give more. They called me ungrateful and selfish. But after hearing what you did, how you stood up, how you chose yourself, it felt like someone lit a path I didn't know existed. You helped me realize that saying no isn't cruel. It's self-protection. It's preserving the most precious thing, yourself. I sat there quietly, hands wrapped around a now cold cup of tea, the wind rustling golden maple leaves outside. Inside me, something had quietly begun to bloom. It wasn't pride or vindication, but the powerful feeling of being seen, of being understood, and of knowing that my painful journey had resonated with someone else, giving them the courage to start their own. I wrote back to Melanie, thanking her for her courage and reinforcing that she wasn't alone or selfish, but just learning to love herself the right way. In that moment, something became crystal clear. I used to think I had lost my family, but the truth was, I was redefining it, finding it in people who love without conditions, who give without expectation, and who respect others as full human beings. Sunlight poured into my room, and I took a deep breath, feeling nothing heavy on my chest anymore. I was no longer the old Sarah, the girl who always stepped aside, who stayed quiet for fear of upsetting others. Now I was Sarah, who knew how to say enough, who knew when to walk away when someone didn't value her. And the most beautiful part? I wasn't alone in this journey, because out there somewhere, people like Melanie were finding the courage to step out of the shadows, and if my path could light even a small part of theirs, then every bit of pain I had endured was worth it. I no longer hoped for my family to understand. I didn't wait for an apology. Maybe one day they would look back and understand, or maybe not. And either way, that was okay. I finally knew that true value doesn't come from sacrificing yourself to keep others warm, but from the quiet peace of living true to who you are. Sometimes, walking away from family isn't a loss. It's the first step toward reclaiming your true self and your real worth. Living in Boulder, a quiet peace settled over me, a stark contrast to the turmoil of my past. The distance from my biological family became permanent. The consequences they faced a result of their own choices, not my vengeance. I accepted that they might never understand, but my focus had shifted entirely to building my own life. I learned the hard truth. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's essential for survival. My self-worth wasn't, and isn't, measured by how much I sacrifice for others, especially when it means erasing myself. Choosing to prioritize my own well-being and peace wasn't abandoning my family, but finally embracing myself. I discovered that walking away from a relationship that harms you isn't a loss. It's gaining the freedom to find genuine connection and reclaim who you are. My story, unexpectedly shared, resonated with others facing similar struggles, showing them that breaking the cycle is possible and that they are not alone. I found that the true luxury wasn't money, but the quiet peace of living authentically, no longer setting myself on fire to keep others warm. This is Sarah's story, a powerful reminder that you are not obligated to sacrifice yourself just to preserve a relationship labeled family when it lacks respect. When you set boundaries and choose yourself, you're not being selfish, you're living truthfully. Not everyone will understand that, but the peace you find will be worth it. Because sometimes walking away from family isn't a loss. It's the first step toward reclaiming your true self and your real worth. If Sarah's story resonated with you and you want to hear more powerful, real-life accounts of finding strength and overcoming challenges, subscribe to our channel, Lifestories1. We share inspiring stories every week to remind you that you're not alone. Hit subscribe and the notification bell